Hey everybody, this is Ryan back with Viva HR, and we are talking HR. This is like going to be a knowledge power fest. We got John Baldino coming, um, and if you've been to some of the SHRM conferences, if you're in the Northeast, you definitely know who this guy is. I'm super excited to have him. He's built an HR consulting business from ground up, and so we're going to talk about the ins and outs, and with everything going on in the world with COVID, the uncertainty, the election. We're going to dive into everything HR people don't want to talk about.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes it exciting. No, let's have some fun with it. John, tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about your backstory and what led you to start your business.
Well, Ryan, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Excited to be here. And opening qualifier, I just since you and I last chatted, I just want to make sure I've got the Movember stash going.
Wasn't
Uh,
sure it was you or not. I had to make sure. Oh, double
or,
take.
or some cop from a 70s drama show, right? On Kojak. The myself and a few other HR pros every year raise some money for men's cancer issues. So hence
Cool.
stash. So backstory for me, as you mentioned, Northeast, really specifically Philadelphia, is home for me, has been day one. And I've been fortunate enough to have lots of opportunities in my career, to pursue an HR related path. Most of that early on started really in the training and development end of the spectrum, and then moved a bit to leadership development, and then all of the HR competencies that came along with it. And as you shared, I mean, I've been with all kinds of organizations, startups to tens of thousands, global organizations. And a little over 8 years ago, well, actually a little more than 8 years ago, I started up Humoriso as a global HR consulting firm, and it's been awesome, awesome time.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I want to dive into all the nuts and bolts of it a little bit. Let me just kind of walk through the logistics of the outline and kind of what we're going to talk about today. So for those of you joining us for the first time, you're either live or watching this recorded. Um, it's our chance to bring in HR experts, people that have built a business around HR. And sometimes that's vendors, sometimes that's practitioners, sometimes that's consultants. And for today's instance, we're talking to John because he has been not only in the HR practitioner world in corporate America, but then has transitioned to the HR consultancy world from ground up. And so I love the perspective. We're going to dive in and talk about kind of what it takes to build a business.
Mm.
Now, as an outsider, you're no longer the insider, but as an outsider, how does that dialogue change?
Mhm.
And then always making sure you go from being in HR to being an entrepreneur, and the mindset shift that you have to go through to be able to make that work.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was super easy, right, John?
Yeah. Like, 5, 10 minutes, I had a multi-million dollar organization done.
Exactly.
Uh, you know, yeah, it's nutty. So I don't know. I mean,
Let's start there. Let's talk about the mindset going
yeah,
from being in HR, being your very tactical, procedural job, to now you have to be that ultra creative entrepreneur. What did that look like?
and you started a good spot. So thank you. Really, I would say what the genesis for me became was moving from, so I've been in HR over 29 years at this point. So when I started, and long time ago, right? Obviously, it was very tactical. There was a lot of nuts and bolts stuff that really I had to kind of earn the right. I needed to put the time in. That included, onboarding, payroll, benefits, all of that kind of nuts and bolts, administrative, compliance related work, very tactically oriented, caused me to be very tactically minded, to-do list oriented. In the anybody's, again, if you want to pursue something like this, you're going to move even while you're still within, say, corporate America, or even those that are in HR and nonprofits. You're going to need to move into a more transformational, strategic mindset on
Mhm.
behalf of the organization if you want to grow your HR career. And I say that to mean for most organizations, once you start getting to the director level, certainly by VP, SVP, CHRO, those upper tier HR levels, you really are responsible for the strategic perspective, forecasting, so things like workforce planning, organizational development, these kind of heavy lift perspectives around the business, right? It's business
Yeah.
strategy meets HR. So I sat in that seat for quite a while. And so when I transitioned to open up the consultancy of Humoriso, I had already been kind of doing that on behalf of the organizations that I was a part of. So the last gig I had was VP of HR for a national bank. So, multi-site, people all over the place. That kind of perspective, you have to have a more, let's say, global, right, view of things. So when I started Humoriso, I really didn't know any differently at that point. Like I approached Humoriso globally. And it's funny, Ryan, I'll tell you, I got some advice when I first started. People have very well-meaning folks wanting to tell me how to do what I'm going to do, right? So, and they said to me, you need to, if you're doing this, that's awesome. And you want to call it John Baldino Consulting because everyone knows you and that'll be your money is because
Yeah.
of Baldino. And I remember, like, again, I'm teasing, but I appreciated the advice, but I didn't want the consulting firm to be Baldino. I knew that I was going to be building something that was going to bring in talent from other places, other professionals who had their own kind of following.
So you had that perspective from day one. You kind of knew you wanted to build a multifaceted, multi-consultancy approach, right? And I think a lot of people, they don't start there. They start with, I'm going to offer consulting. It starts with I,
Yeah,
and it kind of ends there. So your approach was built a brand around multi-touch personnel.
absolutely. I mean, and that's the word. For me, I was interested in building a brand, hence Humoriso, right? Not Baldino. I
Yeah.
wanted it to be something that had that larger appeal. And that's tough. I'm going to be honest with you. It's tough for a lot of HR folks to make that transition. One, in part because it's a huge risk. When I started, I gave the last gig that I had a 30-day notice, and I can't now. I'm not advising this for everybody, so people who are listening, please do not follow exactly what I did. I have to qualify, right?
Do as I say, not as I did.
Right. It's good parenting skills right here, right? Um, and then I came home and said to my wife, "It's time." And she was like, "What did you do?" I'm like, "Well, I gave him 30 days." Now the good news was they didn't accept my resignation, which that's a whole other topic. Like there's no such thing, you have to accept it. But but my wife was like, "Well, what are we doing here with 3 kids, mortgage?
Yeah.
um it's scary." And I was fortunate enough to have put some money aside, right? So for us, I was able to say, "Look, we have X amount of months. I want to give it a go because if I don't try, I'll wonder." And I had the latitude, I had the partnership to be able to do that. And I would say that because you have to know your tolerance for risk because it's real. And money was tight. Not every month is a winning month, especially when you're first getting started. Do you have an appetite for that? Can you deal with that? Are you willing to sort of grit your teeth and get through that? You have to have an appetite for it.
So let's start about those early years.
Sure.
What were some of the things that you did where you laid track, you laid the groundwork to help you be successful long term? You started with a vision of it's bigger than me,
Yeah.
which I appreciate because I think it gives a lot of deep perspective. But more importantly is you got to feed the family. Not there's the vanity metrics and then there's the sanity metrics, right? Vanity is like, oh, I'm making $1 million a year. Well, the sanity would say, but I spent 1.2 million to make 1 million. So I'm really not making it. I'm in debt.
Yeah.
So what did you do to actually continue the sanity of consistently feeding the family of 3 kids? Like, where were your first executions on where to go get customers, those practical get after it moments?
Yeah, thank you. I would say your network is so important. And if you've been an HR practitioner, as an example, who sort of lived in a bubble of just being surrounded by those that you work with, um, you may have a difficult time. I felt more confident because I had put the networking time in with other businesses already. I had been involved locally with our SHRM chapters. And so, was a volunteer, participated. So because of that, knew a lot of folks. But
Good
you're
network.
talking
Yeah.
also about a network of relation. I mean, I'm a networker as well. Like I'll go out and do happy hours and that sort of stuff. But you don't do that in a month and say, okay, now it's been 30 days. What are my returns on that? This is years before I ever knew I was going to draw on that. It had already been something I extended myself to do. So that made a huge difference. I will tell you that I worked July 31st, 2012 was my last day in that VP role. And then August 1st of 2012 was the first day of Humoriso. And that morning I had breakfast with a business owner that I knew. And he was like, hey, well, I just want to pick your brain. What are you thinking of doing? And I shared with him. And before I left, I signed him as my first client.
Cool.
So, I felt validated that this was the
Yeah.
right path, but I'd already had those relationships to draw on, and I didn't really have to do and ask. I just shared the vision, and he got it and wanted some of that for his organization.
Yeah. I love it. I love the stories of the early years because so much of that is the art and science of business,
Mm,
right? We understand that the art is how well do you address the pain points and the value proposition of your service or product that you're offering? How do you craft and artistically tell that story and identify that? The science of the business is, can we execute on it, and how many people do we have to tell that story to? And
right.
you can't run a business until you create a blend of the art and the science, because you could have the greatest tactful approach and tell that story to 100 people, but if you don't know how to articulate it to pain points, you're going to strike out a lot. So I love hearing that, because networking, you get a little bit of let's say you get more of 5 strikes per at bat as opposed to 3, right? They're going to have a little bit more leniency to kind of go through some of those rough edges. Your network's probably going to be more trusting right out the gate, and I think that says a lot for those folks that are kind of looking into 2021. They're
Yeah.
starting now. They're strategically planning, building out their year. It's a whole new ball game. Networking events, face-to-face events may not be occurring for
Yeah.
quite some time. And so we have to be a little bit more out of the ordinary. What kind of things would you recommend to somebody right now that's saying, I need to go generate X number of dollars of revenue from new customers, and I don't know who they are. I don't know that they exist, and they don't know that I exist.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is you have to have a sort of your own personal come to Jesus moment. What am I good at? What am I not? And for a lot of HR folks, and I don't mean this disparagingly, sales has not been in HR wheelhouse classically. So the idea of developing business, right, good old BD stuff, isn't normally what HR had direct responsibility for. We would complain about them from an HR standpoint,
Yes.
right, in our
The
organization.
over promising of every sales rep.
Right. Oh, and doing offer letters for salespeople. And we're like, look at these people making commission, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But it's hard, right? So I think you need to own what you can do and can't do. So be honest about that first, as you plan for what you might need to do again in sort of tilling the ground for whatever work that you may get. Partner with um, vendors, other businesses that don't do what you do, but are maybe speaking to the same audience. So if you don't have the wherewithal, if you are an independent contractor consultant, talk to, and I'll say this, if you're a traditional HR consultant, maybe you're doing best practices, compliance, maybe you are doing organizational design and development work, stuff like that. You're not a benefits broker. You're not selling payroll services. Maybe partner with somebody who is, and develop a plan jointly to go after some potentials, right? Um, because that's part of owning what you can or can't do. Two are stronger than one, right? So having somebody to kind of run with is a good idea. The other thing I'd say is, um, if you really don't have the wherewithal to leap from an inside HR practitioner role to a complete solo consultant, you can take the hybrid for a bit to learn some things, maybe by becoming a consultant for a larger consultancy, right? Your E&Ys and
Mm,
KPMG and those kinds of places where maybe you can cut your teeth from a consulting standpoint as to how do I apply what I know as a practitioner in this consultant world before I just bite off everything and put all my eggs into this basket, rise or fall. You have to know yourself, and that's why I think having the come to Jesus time is about your pride as well. What I said early on, again, to my wife, when she's like, well, what happens if it doesn't go well? I said, look, if we run out of money, I'll go work at Wawa, which, for those of you who are listening who don't know what Wawa is, it's a convenience chain of convenience stores, mostly in the East Coast side of the U.S. I said, I'll pour coffee there. I'm not proud. My ultimate goal will be to take care of my family. I could keep that as my prime objective, and the pride just would subside. You have to deal with that devil yourself, whatever that might be for you, so that you're free to then run after it. I didn't feel the burden in that regard then, even 2 months in, and for the first year, I worked out of my basement, and my basement is unfinished. And so I worked out of my basement just so that I had a place to go. I put myself into that winning mindset. I was developing that business. And every day when I was in that basement, all, jacked up with lights and all this stuff to make it look like something, I knew my hunger kept going. And we're going to make this, we're going to make this, and this, we're going to make it. Right. So you also, I would say, the last bit real quick, I'll say, is set your environment as well. What's going to motivate you. So
yeah,
bring in
I
those
like that.
environmentally that are going to help charge you up as well.
Well, I think setting your environment is surrounding yourself with those who can motivate you, that can mentor you, but also niching into a specific industry
Hmm.
can give you a lot more scalability quicker than any other thing I've seen. I mean, we've partnered and worked with HR consultants from coast to coast, and I'll tell you, the ones that niched earlier found success faster.
Yep.
They are the HR consultant for independent auto mechanics with less than 10 employees. I mean, those very specific, when you make a phone call and you say, hey, Bill, at Bill's Garage, let me tell you why you should consider us.
Right.
And they go, oh, they know our pain point. They know our problem with mechanics. They know our problem with turnover, the licensing, the certification, like whatever it is,
Yep. Yep.
it lowers down that barrier. So I like the set your environment, because I think niching and getting into a specific area of expertise can really ramp up that quicker.
Yes. Yes, I totally agree with you. I'll give you a little, however, you have to know what you want that to be, as opposed
Good.
to having prospects tell you what it should be. Early
Great
on,
point.
I was asked quite a few times in the beginning of Humoriso to do direct hire recruiting again and again and again. And I don't have a problem with recruiting. And we do recruiting. We do direct hire recruiting. I did not want that to be the first thing that turned on, because my worry was that I wouldn't be seen as a human resources consultancy, but as another recruiting firm. And I didn't want to be just a recruiting firm. So and that was hard, because that meant sometimes I had to say,
Hmm.
no, I'm not the person for you. Let me get you connected to somebody else, right, that I could recommend, because I didn't want that to become what I was known for. I wanted to make sure, because again, for me, to make sure that we were a human resources consultancy, not just one piece, because I knew I was building divisions from this global perspective. And recruitment, some people are going to hear this and think I'm crazy. For me, recruitment was an easy add-on. it was harder to be seen as the OD consultancy. It was harder to
Mm,
be seen as the compliance consultancy. It was harder to be seen as training and development oriented. It was harder to do that than to just say, what jobs do you have open? Send them to me. Let me see if I can fill them, right? Let me see what I can do. So I built those areas first. And so now the direct hire division that we have, oh, it's killing it. It's doing great work. But I felt like that was an easier add-on. I didn't let that define, even though the ask was there and money was there, that isn't what I wanted to be known for. So be wise about the niche that you want to travel, and understand that that means if you are on your own, um, it's harder for you to both do the work and develop the next prospect concurrently. So you may find yourself financially having some ripples, right, in the flow of money. You may need 90 days, 120 days, 180 days for a particular project that you might be doing, which takes a ton of your time. You got to be mindful. You may come right off of that mountain into a dip because you haven't had the time to develop business. So that's why there's partnerships coming back to that, or some other outlet for sales generation that you could look into locally with your Chamber of Commerce and a couple of other outlets. Maybe that could be a resource as well.
I love it. Good resources. John, switching gears just a little bit. This is the time of year where you're really going to dive deep into strategy and figure out the world's pivoting, pain points are changing, offerings need to be adjusted. Looking going forward, if you're a standalone independent HR consultant, maybe you got a couple team members and you're trying to grow, let's just chat through a little bit hourly versus fixed proposals. Walking in as a fixed flat monthly fee and you get up to X number of hours per month of HR servicing, whether it's direct hire work, whether it's compliance, what have you.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that? And how does someone protect themselves but yet position themselves aggressively?
It's an interesting question. So from a spirit of transparency, Humoriso does both. We do both hourly and fixed pricing. We also, I'll even parse down the fixed one more step. There's a retained model and a project-based fixed model, because we know how long some things will take. And so we're able to commit for, this timeline and, for this amount. Um, I think that the appetite is going to be dependent upon a couple of things in terms of what a client may be down for. One, if they're not sure what they need,
Yeah.
then you may not want to promise the world, because if they don't use it, then they've got a bad taste in their mouth about you charging them for things that they're not using. So it's always better to start hourly and then convert to a fixed, say, retained model, because every 90 days you should be able to turn to them and say, hey, here's about how much you've been, I know I'm sending you invoices, but we're averaging about 20 hours a month, right, over the last 90 days. Is that going to be normal? Did we just have a hiring blitz and so there was a lot of ramp up work and so now it's going to subside? But maybe it's like, gosh, we only used you for 20 hours. We need you to use you for more. Okay, now be thoughtful about, all right, instead of X being the hourly rate, I'm going to give you a break on that and commit to 20 hours a month, 30 hours a month at kind of based on this pricing. So you can budget and know for the year, this is what it's going to look like, right? I really would save the project-based pricing for things that are real projects, like a beginning, middle, and end kind of thing. So
Yeah.
maybe, and I'll start on the tactical end, maybe things like an employee handbook if you do that kind of work, or an affirmative action plan, or an organizational structural redesign. You're taking them from centralized to decentralized, that kind of, and it's got a beginning, middle, and end.
Yes.
Say it's a fixed price and I'm going to space it out over, it's going to be a 6-month project. and I'm making up numbers. It's a 6-month project, 60 grand, 10 grand a month. I'm going to bill you 10 grand a month so that you don't have to swallow this 60 all at once kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So be thoughtful to these businesses. Every business right now, I don't care how large you are, with the exception of Amazon, CVS, and a few others, they have to be more thoughtful about budgeting because the level at which revenue is coming in has changed a bit because of COVID. So if you can give them the option to sort of space that stuff out, even if it is a fixed price, they love that.
I like that a lot. There's a business coach, Eric McDermott. He's got a lot of great stuff online, and he always talks about when pricing things out, if you're going to do it by a fixed rate, it's only by your W by W that's controlled by you. Meaning, if you can specifically, definitively say what you're going to deliver by when you're going to deliver it, and you can control that A to Z, the W by W, what by when, you can price that comfortably into a fixed fee. But when you add variables into there, hiring is a great one. Hey, we need to hire 2 people rather than doing a fixed rate. That's got to be probably an hourly project because there's too many variables that come into play there, and you don't want to catch yourself in a pickle. Contracts. This comes up fairly often in talking to people. What are your thoughts on it, especially going into a really high uncertainty environment? Is this a time where you protect yourself or protect your client?
You protect yourself. I would say,
Yeah,
I mean, it's always
always.
a little bit of both, right? But um, so depending on how large your consultancy is, practically speaking, I run a business to support businesses. So I have staff, I have employees. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
contractors. I literally have a bunch of W-2 employees. So, I need to do the same things. I have to practice what I'm preaching. I have to do my forecasting and budgeting and that sort of stuff. So having an idea about revenue is important, right? Um, I do believe in contracts. I mean, certainly, whatever attorneys are listening right now, they're going to love me. I'm big with lawyers. You have to have some of your liability parameters in place, have a contract for those reasons. In terms of how long, I think it depends on the work. So Ryan, like if we're going to do like a retained model, fixed pricing, that's not project, but like continuous support. Um, I and this is what Humoriso does. It's a minimum 6 months. Um, I really don't do contracts for 12 months. I go 6 months and then month to month with a 30-day notice.
Mm.
That and I've not had a problem with that. Um,
Well, chances are, if you did anything less than that, well, if the customer balks at the 6 month, to
yeah,
me, they
yeah,
don't have the intention anyway to
right.
commit to a sound relationship.
Well, and I agree with you. And I have said very often, and I'm really very rarely does it ever get pushback. But what I say to folks is you aren't going to start to realize the full impact of what we've been doing until we get past the first 90 days because there's a mess that we're cleaning up, right? There's structures
Right.
we're putting into place. So how that works, you're not going to experience in 10 days, right? You're going to need to get through those first 90 days. And then in the next 90 days, you're going to start to experience what
Mm.
that effort is now giving you. So you should feel good about having a solid picture in 6 months. 90 days, you probably would say it's still a mess or it's not everywhere it's supposed to be. I think it has to travel for a bit. That's my opinion. I know some other organizations and I know some colleagues that do a minimum 12 months. Um, I can't say no. I just have found what I've shared is being more palatable. I mean, we have clients. I still have clients from when we first started. I mean, 7, 8 years, they're not going anywhere. So
Yeah.
it works.
What are some of those unique offerings that might be outside of the box that an independent consultant could start building into their playbook, so to speak, to deliver value to their customers? Is employee handbook the thing is that the first go-to-market strategy, is helping them with a handbook? Where, I mean, how do you identify where is the best value add right out the gate?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be, cover it all. I'd say first, start with what you know how to do and what you know how to do well.
Mm,
Uh, and this may be a little surprising. Just because you like something doesn't mean you can do it well. So make sure you balance those two things. I want you to like what you do, but if what you like isn't something that you've really done very much of and have enough experience, it's really dangerous to go out there and say you're the consultant for this,
yeah.
because you'll get chewed up pretty quickly by other consultants who really can. Um, I made a face at handbooks. I mean, look, would I ever want to build my life on employee handbooks? Please, I'll lay down on the road. Never, never. But I would say those kinds of things could be, if someone wanted to come in and do something. I'm your tactical HR person. I want to come in and kind of revamp your entire um, uh, employee engagement or talent management experience from onboarding to offboarding. And that's all I want to do. Okay. That may include, right, something like a handbook, but it's going to include some other pieces to it as well. I think if I'm going to be even more creative, I think there are some great people doing very decent work in candidate experience right now, which I think is really important,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? And so helping organizations figure out what their employer brand is like on the candidate side, how they walk people, meaning candidates, through the um, initial job ad or passive sourcing, depending upon whether it's active or proactive. I'm sorry, active or passive. Um, and what is that experience like for them through the any assessments or the application process, assessments, interviews, screening? How long does it take? What's the fallout? So there's great opportunity, I think, in candidate experience. I think there's great opportunity in HR technology, in
Hmm.
being a partner. Most organizations like the idea of technology, see, especially now with remote workforce, there's a lot more of a need for a lot of HR systems to be more nimble, to be more flexible and mobile. But the skill set for determining what the right kind of software might be may not be in-house for you as an organization. So having an HR tech pro be able to be a consultant for that, for a project,
Hmm.
um, is another good idea if that's a niche that you can swim in. I even mentioned affirmative action plan a few minutes ago. There are still organizations that need that. I, can I write an affirmative action plan? Heck yeah. Do I want to? No. It is just not the best use of my time for all the other stuff I have going. So I have an affirmative action plan consultant. That's all he does. That's all he does. So he's phenomenal. He does it in his sleep.
Yeah.
So if you can be that narrow, um, great. You just have to cast a very wide net, though. If you're that narrow, your net for prospects you have to be willing to kind of be groove with SEO and some other online marketing stuff so that you can kind of get your brand out there because organizations across the country need you. Affirmative action plan consultants aren't a dime a dozen. They're hard to find.
Very good. John, I can't even talk now. I wrote down handful of things that kind of my quick playbook, so to speak, that if I were to scrap Viva HR, if I were to scrap everything that I've done and just go start from the ground up to build my business, where would I go? And I think it's a healthy thing to do at every stage of business because it puts things in perspective. And it's an opportunity for competitors to creep in. But let me rattle off a couple of things that I was thinking I would recommend back to myself if I were to start off again and come in it from an HR consultant. First thing I would do is I would find every chamber of commerce within a 25-mile radius of my house. And I would find any way that I could provide educational value to their membership. So I'd join the membership, I'd join every committee that I could join, and then I'd do whatever it took to say, let me do some educational webinars. Some topics that came to mind have everything to do with COVID employment concerns. Can you fire someone if they took too much time off because they had COVID? Like, that's a question entrepreneurs in my Facebook community are asking every single day. This person's complained they've spent over a week off, getting free time off with COVID. I just want to fire him. Can you
Yeah.
do it? That's that. Those are just the questions entrepreneurs are asking. The other thing, yeah, thank you. The, see, most entrepreneurs are like, can them? I'm done with them.
Yeah, look, forget entrepreneurs. We have companies today. We have a company, 600 employees. They called today to ask the same thing. We're sick of this person. We're just going to fire him. Like, oh, okay, you're sick of the person who is sick. Oh, that sounds great. Let me
Yeah.
call the newspaper. Like.
Let me let me just get the legwork going here. Get a PR nightmare going.
Right.
So the other thing is joining other areas where you can meet the decision maker face to face. So BNI is a nationwide networking group. I think it's a great place to start. And you can join right now, you can join them all virtually. You can join BNI chapters all across the country, and you don't have to commit to anything, but going and you get to hear firsthand what pain points the raw entrepreneurs are saying in those groups. Is a great way to get some dialogue, understand their pain points. Um, this might sound silly, but I am a huge advocate of going into ecclesiastical environments, going and talking to different churches, pastors, um, what have you. A lot of them are going to have employment support groups, and it's their way to give back. So they're housing these virtual employee. I'm seeing them all over the place. Get in there and offer some level of assistance to the job seekers. Go out and start networking with the job seekers, helping them understand from an HR side how they can present themselves better to get an opportunity for success. And you'd be surprised how quickly that networking can butterfly and pattern out for you. Those are a couple of things, and I kind of mentioned it. Facebook, we do so well in Facebook networking, just engaging with conversation in Facebook groups.
Mhm.
Facebook Super Bowl ad this last year had nothing to do with the posting pictures or selfie videos or memes in Facebook. It talked there. They spent $2 million for a 30-second ad to talk about Facebook groups. It's a huge component to Facebook that they're emphasizing more and more and more. Get in the groups of where your customers are and listen, see what they're talking about, and that's talking about SEO. If they're talking about it on Facebook, chances are they're going to Google it as well. And
Yeah.
if you can write some content and be there for them, I think it's a great way. Anyway, those are my few bullet point ideas of looking into 2021, what someone could do to kind of leg up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great list. I would say, and I don't want to be the contrarian to anything, but I want to give, if I could, I'll step back
Yeah.
even from some of it. Um, what we know pre-COVID is that those age 35 and younger were on the decline, anywhere from 40 to 65% in joining groups. And so things like the Chamber of Commerce, Rotary, Kiwanis, whatever those organizations that you may be used to, what we're finding is that certainly there's still people there, but they are of a particular demographic, right? They're
Yeah.
old. And so if you want to get to, say, the younger entrepreneurs, the those that are sort of mid to moving towards upper level in their careers, moving from that controller to CFO, right? Those kinds of folks, it may not be that they're all going to be at those kinds of meetings, even virtually, because the appeal to joining is down, right? For a lot of things,
Yeah.
whether it's those groups, churches, whatever it might be, all of that kind of joining is down. Facebook groups, easy. I'll say I'm a part of this group or what have you. The trick with the groups online is engaging. You cannot just be a member of. You really have to get in there and read and respond. People
Yeah.
want to see engagement. You have to give them a little bit of who you are if you want them to ask for more. If you just are sort of the voyeur reading the wall all the time in a Facebook group, what's it doing for you? It's not
Right.
really doing too much. quite frankly, it's what I'm seeing this past year with sort of the voyeur consultants who are deciding that their specialty for this year is inclusion and diversity. And it's like, look, where you been for 20 years? Don't tell me you're a diversity expert because the past 2 months you care about Black Lives Matter. It's much more than that.
Yeah.
And if you want to go in as a poser, people will tear you apart, and they ought to. So you can't just kind of look at, again, reading the walls and saying, oh, people are all talking about diversity. I'm going to put together a diversity webinar and tell people, all about what they need to be mindful of when it comes to diversity. I'd be hesitant, right? For with that, really go back to the core of what you know how to do. Don't look for the soup du jour. Stick to your main entree, right?
Yeah.
And then branch out from there.
Really good points. Really good points. Well, I'm going to round it off here with a couple last minute questions, but I want to add this little nugget in there because you tackled it just a little bit. It was talking about channel partners.
Yeah.
I think finding software companies like Viva HR, and this might be a quick plug for us. We have an entire marketplace for HR consultants, and it's free to join. You come in, you fill out an application, and you become a Viva HR certified consultant. And now you've got customers in the environment where they're already posting jobs, they're already dealing with employee issues. They
Yeah.
can quickly say, hey, let me go to the marketplace and I can quickly find consultants, and there can be a great, and there's a bunch of platforms like mine. It's not just Viva HR that offers this. I did not invent that. I wish I could take credit, but there's marketplaces for you to join and be part of the conversation and add some value. And before you know it, my favorite examples, look at Salesforce. Do you know how many different millionaires Salesforce Marketplace has created just from the independent software gurus that said, I'm going to latch on to this marketplace. Oh, I need to switch my camera. That's
Yeah.
that's exactly where, it started from, was how do you create a marketplace where you can identify very similar pain points very quickly. So anyway, the quick plug, but let me end on a couple questions, John, just to help get to know you a little bit better.
Yep.
What's your favorite book that you've read in the last year
Oh
that you would
my
recommend?
gosh. I'm gonna blank. Malcolm Gladwell, but it went out of my head. I see the cover. It was a Gladwell book. I'll get it to you.
All right. Okay. How many hours of night do you get of sleep?
Oh my gosh, this I turned 50 this past summer, and it's a beast. I'm probably good for 6 on a good night, probably 5, just because I fall asleep good, but I wake up during the night. It's annoying.
So what time do you get up every day?
4:15.
4:50. Holy, that's still night in my opinion.
4:15 at the gym by 4:30. So
Good
yeah,
for you.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love it. Were you referring to Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell?
Yes, thank you. My gosh, you were looking at my notes. Yes, that's the book.
Yes, I listened to that on audio and I loved it. And let me just say that a little bit about that book.
Yeah,
It completely changed the way that I listen to people's problems, because there's so many great examples at looking at any singular moment in time from multiple angles.
yeah.
And I love that perspective.
That's a fantastic lesson, Ryan. Seriously, thanks for saying that. That's a great lesson. And honestly, it's a bias combater. When you
Yeah.
can come open to listening to other people's perspective, your ability to want to engage your bias is minimized. So
Yeah.
good. That's great.
Cool. All right. Last question. I love to ask this one. Where is your favorite vacation destination?
Oh, so I got to do Turks and Caicos right
Ooh.
before COVID. My wife and I planned my 50th early for just the two of us, and it was, Turks was awesome, awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, John, how can everybody get a hold of you if they want to learn more about what you do, get in touch with you, even look into your business a little bit? How can
Thank
they
you.
reach you?
Appreciate that. Yeah. So I'm pretty active on social media. So, if you search for John Baldino, I'm JB Alive on Twitter. And Twitter is a huge active HR community, by the way. So definitely would encourage people there. LinkedIn, all that good stuff. And then humoriso.com, HUMARESO.com, all about the firm and other ways to get a hold of me as well.
And they can see you at every Nationals baseball game, right?
I mean, no.
I'm just kidding.
They will see me.
John's a big Phillies fan.
Phillies,
I'm just
yes,
giving him a hard
sorry.
time. Or Mets. He's probably at the Mets park.
Yes, I have. Yeah, and one other thing, there's the one thing I want to make sure that everybody knows is, as you talked about with community, there's a lot of free resources out there. And I know for me, I
Yes.
have a YouTube channel and all that good stuff. There's so much free content, free blogs, all that. Please, everybody, use them. If they help open a door for you as you're trying to prospect with some potential businesses in terms of where pain points are, please use those materials. It doesn't matter that Humoriso wrote it. Use it for you.
Fantastic. Wonderful. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Ryan, for having me. I really appreciate it.